Alrighty, welcome everybody. Apologies for the delayed start there, but yeah, really excited to be speaking with everybody today. We've got some really exciting things that we're going to be sharing with some recent conversations we've had with MSPs, some recent trade shows, and yeah, we're really excited to be getting into it. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide and make some introductions.
Sure.
So we've got three of us joining from the team here today. Myself, kind of teeing things up here, emceeing at the beginning, but quickly going to be handing things over to Tanya Alfonso, our VP for Vicarius North America. We've also got Landon Tholen, who is recently joining us, and also Solution Architect for Vicarius North America, as well as, of course, myself, Ryan Patton, Solution Architect Team Lead for Vicarius North America. Just a couple kind of quick housekeeping things here. So really the main goal of today, again, we really wanted to make this training focused on MSPs. As I mentioned, we recently attended Pax8 Beyond, IT Nation Secure. We've been working with a lot of our MSP partners in the past, and this is an area that we really want to build a lot of focus around. It's something that we're quite honed in on internally here. So we want to kind of share some of our findings in some of those conversations, some of the trends that we've seen, and how we think that our product can align with that. There is a certification that will be sent out for everyone that joins. No worries. So yeah, stick around and be sure to share that with your network later on. And yeah, just kind of brief agenda here before we get into the actual content. So we kind of wanted to talk about the challenges that we see, the trends. It's something that you hear a lot, I think, in a lot of those trade shows, as I mentioned. You hear a lot about AI and how attackers are using that to accelerate their, malicious efforts, and might be curious about how we as defenders can kind of combat that. We're hearing a lot about how MSPs are, trying to reduce risk, going back to that previous example, but also, gain efficiency in that process and grow their business. So those are some of the themes. And, we're going to also be talking a little bit about the threat landscape there. From there, we're going to be introducing Vicarius, so seeing how we can meet that challenge with the product, just kind of talking about some of the core competencies and so on. We'll be going into a brief demo. This is an hour session, by the way. So if you're looking for something a little bit more of a deep dive, we'll be happy to get you some, the next session that we do something like that. We also have some on-demand training paths. We'll be briefly touching on how you can access those. And then finally, we'll be going into just a brief kind of QA and wrapping things up. So yeah, with that, I'd like to pass things over to Tanya to tell us a little bit about the challenge that we're seeing.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, everybody, for joining. We are 4 days, 2 business days left from closing the quarter. So I appreciate everybody who's attending today. And like Ryan said, we're going to go through sharing some insights, moving into demo, and get you on your way. So like Ryan also mentioned, we're coming off of having been on the road at a couple of different conferences. And so at those conferences, we've had a lot of conversations. Specific in the vulnerability management, exposure management space that we talk about, the conversations really come to, I have an okay time, and I'm able to, identify solutions. I'm able to help pinpoint solutions. There's so many vulnerabilities out there. All these tools are helping me to get more granular in pinpointing solutions. But the one question that always gets asked is, how do you help me solve it? Right? How do I address this? And we are in the business of solving problems. And what I'm going to talk about here is a couple of the challenges that we see. There's actually 3 main challenges, not new, but growing concerns that are bringing us to this point of why solving is even more important than ever. First challenge is the vulnerability forecast. Last year, unprecedented growth, 38% in the CVEs that we saw. We're expecting to have another record-breaking year of CVE growth, getting us from 45 to almost 50,000 CVEs. That's about 3,000 to 4,000 new CVEs identified each month. Again, you all know this, you see this all the time, but what's happening is, how do you address this, and how do you do it in an efficient way? And a lot of organizations have to start thinking about what they're going to do differently, because how it was done in the past is not going to be sustainable. And it hasn't been sustainable, frankly, for quite some time. What's really important is speed of execution, but also action. These two things are imperative. An alarming data point that I came across is that 60% of breaches is to vulnerabilities that actually had a fix. And you can see down below here, the actors, the threat actors, the bad actors, they're working so much more quickly than the defenders are working. And so we have to, again, like we were saying, come up with how we're going to be addressing that. But it takes 3.5 months roughly on average to identify or to patch a vulnerability, and exploits can happen in less than a week. It still remains, by the way, exploits as the #1 entry point for breach. So what are the two main culprits of this that we see, the two habits that exist, which we say is a need for change? The first is that it's still manual processes. So like I said, everything down to identification, prioritization, these are becoming systematic within organizations, but they're still manual processes when it comes to patching, 68% actually here. And then most companies, or half of the companies, actually don't have a formal process and patch management policy in place. And a lot of this is because what you're dealing with is a tale of two cities. You've got one side, which is a security team, the other side, which is the IT team. And for us, you know, for us to help and for everybody to come together in a formalized policy, you have to have both functions working together. So that's another piece of that. To add to this, this sky is falling scenario, but to add to it, the second biggest and important thing is that was just the patching scenarios that we were talking about, the CVEs that were identified and the CVEs that get patched. Into 2026, Gartner predicts that over 50% of the attack surface is not even patchable. So what do you do then? And this is a huge leap from previous years where it was less than 10% not patchable. Now it's 50%. So remediation is really a weak point in this entire cycle, right? And like I mentioned, identification, prioritization, they're doing all right. Mostly people are okay with what's going on in their organization, right? It's not perfect, but it's all right. Remediation remains this point, and I say remediation in the broader sense, like patch management policy, and then what you do when there is no patch, the whole gamut, very, very low sense of confidence around the effectiveness and the efficiency of how that's operating in organizations today. To add to that, we have the third element, which is that there's a security shortage, a cybersecurity talent shortage. So over 5 million open roles for cybersecurity in the industry today. Can't fill them fast enough, right? We've got this perfect storm that's brewing. You have the talent gap that is growing and continues to grow. You have the explosion of vulnerabilities that are out there, and then you have all this unpatchable attack surface. So the question is, how do we help, and what are the opportunities that lie ahead? Managed services and everything that you bring to the table, this is at the epicenter of the storm. You're in the sweet spot right now. Coming off of the events that we were at, it's two alarming data points that I had heard, not alarming, but I thought they were quite shocking. The SaaS industry, right? Managed services compared to SaaS industry, managed services is 1.5x of the entire SaaS industry. It is also 1.5x of the hyperscalers combined. So it's huge and it's growing. It's growing at roughly 13% year over year. One of the reasons that managed services is growing is because cybersecurity needs are growing. So you've got this, what I was just sharing, culmination of cybersecurity needs are growing, right, in organizations because the risk is growing. And then the second piece of it is that you have a lack of skilled talent, being able to hire and retain skilled talent, which puts companies in a place where they need to outsource. On top of the fact you also don't have functions talking to each other. So that's another reason why they're outsourcing. So you're answering a problem for your clients and you're delivering on outcomes for your clients focused on two things. Number one, you're reducing risk. And the second thing that you're offering to your clients is you're saving them money. Those are the two things. It's kind of like a, don't care how you get there, make it happen for me, and to go ahead and do that. And what we're going to share today is how VRX can help you achieve that. And we can help it in one of two ways. We can help you grow business and we can also help you improve your efficiencies. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. What I have seen from what I've seen and heard and learned from all the conversations is that in the client sets that you're working with, it's one of two places. Either you have a break-fix client set, or you have clients that are, let's call it more immature when it comes to what they're looking for. And so you're able to just offer some basic patch management. That is one way to do it. But as this industry, like we've just shared, is growing, as cybersecurity needs are growing, as the talent shortage is there is a need in the industry for going after additional businesses to help them in this instance. So adding in VRX, and we're going to show you how, to the tech stack helps you get to this good, better, best bundle that you can take this new offering to a new client set and help grow your business. And I'm going to talk about in a little bit what are some of the industries we see that this need is very, very prevalent. The second is you're already working in those industries. And chances are, if you're already working in those industries, you might fall in the category where a lot of what you're already doing behind the scenes to help your clients reduce risk and save money is largely dependent on your own manual efforts. So it's not their manual efforts, but it's your manual efforts. And if it's your manual efforts, putting people behind solving these problems is a costly endeavor. And so putting and leaning into the processes and leaning into the tools that you can put in place to run automation and to improve efficiencies is going to help you get to a better ROI. So those are the two things we're going to talk about and the ways we're going to demonstrate helping you grow your business and helping you improve efficiency. A little bit about Vicarius, why customers work with us and choose us. Let me just introduce Vicarius here. We've been around since 2016, originated out of Tel Aviv, have offices in New York. And the company actually was founded on the premise of one of the things we're going to talk about today, which is patchless protection. What do you do when there is no patch? The whole company and the core of the company is predicated on solving problems. And actually, hot off the press today, we're in the Gartner report speaking about exposure management and remediation and what we're doing and leading the charge in coming up with new automations and solutions to solve that problem. So happy to share that after this session today. We're global across the globe. We have about 1 million assets that are protected by Vicarius VRX solution, 600 clients active across the globe, and partners as well. The industries that we're in, like I was talking about, they're usually predicated on a couple of key components, right? Clients that have sensitive data, clients that have regulatory requirements, clients that have compliance needs. They need to remediate. Their business depends on it. They can't have downtime. This is the core of it, right? So we go across many industries. One thing I do want to point out is our ecosystem in which we function. We do work with partners. We work with CrowdStrike. We work with Pax8. We're at that event. We work with AWS Marketplace. So you can find us in all these places. All of our business, we have a practice with partners, but all of our business goes through the channel. So we do not, although we are serving clients directly, we actually do not work and transact with any clients direct. It's all done through the channel, 100%. But the two industries I want to focus on, because they are very prevalent, and I will tell you, they came up repeatedly in the past month and before that. Number one is healthcare. The challenge in healthcare, and we see a lot of success. We see a lot of partnerships for us happening in the healthcare space. The main reason is because you're literally between life and death. This is a matter of life and death when you're dealing in the healthcare industry and any kind of breach. It's also the most expensive breaches that occur. In the healthcare space, when a company is breached or has a ransomware attack, they have no choice but to pay the ransom. And it's because of the risk that they have associated to it. So a high need. In the conversations here, it's not like if they need to remediate, if they need to take action. What's happening here is they have to take action. So the question is, how can you help, not should you help? And so we see this as a very, very high need. If you have any healthcare clients, we have a lot of experience in this space, and it's something we should definitely talk about. The second is the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector, like healthcare, has a lot of outdated systems, has a lot of systems that require, specifics, like call it legacy systems and so forth. But the thing with the manufacturing sector is time is money, and they can't afford the downtime. So another reason why it's very important to stay proactive in terms of addressing any kind of vulnerabilities that are out there. You can see the staggering numbers here. 260K per hour is the cost of downtime, and their attacks roughly around 4.7 million. So again, this is one of those not need to have, not nice to have scenarios for manufacturing sector. And a couple things last I'll leave you with on us in terms of working with clients. What we're typically known for is ease of deployment, ease of support, and working with clients. And lastly, like I mentioned, and you're going to hear today, is just the remediation around the automated remediation. Those are our three things that are, you can see us here compared to other organizations out there, but those are really the three that are kind of the shining stars for us. It's that we're easy to deploy, we are easy with support, we offer a full breadth of support, and the last is the remediation. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Landon, who's going to take you through a preview of the solution moving before the demo.
Awesome. Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks.
You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I'll keep running it. Next slide. Sure.
Oh, perfect. So at a high level, what we're going to be showing today is how we're going to help solve these challenges that we've been outlining through a unified platform that's going to be able to provide you and your teams the ability to have streamlined end-to-end workflows that are typically disjointed between different tools, teams, different siloed organizations, now all on a single platform with a single agent. Organizations have this cycle that they're going through dealing with the exponential increase of vulnerabilities that Tanya mentioned, where you've got your challenges in identification, potentially mitigation, remediation, and then validation. And it's this loop that you're going through over and over again, but the challenge is always increasing, and so you can't keep up without automation and a consolidated platform to close that loop. So not only do we provide that, but in closing that loop, we give you the flexibility to accommodate the unique needs that your clients might have, right? Because you can't just patch everything immediately. We wish that was the case, but in some cases, there's not a patch available. In some cases, you can't patch it because you're going to break a critical application. This platform is going to give you the flexibility to still provide protections, patchless protection around those sorts of vulnerabilities, or do custom mitigations, be able to take arbitrary actions against those devices to ensure that you've driven down the risk for that organization. We can go to the next slide. Now we're going to be able to give you this out of the box across all of your Windows, Linux, Mac devices, all major versions of those operating systems. And we try to pre-build as much content for you as possible so that you can hit the ground running and have a very low time to value for delivery to your clients. We do this through pre-built reporting. Not only that, but when it comes to the remediation side of things, we have a catalog of over 10,000 third-party applications that we manage for you. So you don't have to worry about dealing with 6 updates of Chrome a month and pushing it out. It's all just handled, and whatever level of automation you're comfortable with, we can accommodate that for you and your clients. And then not only that, but when it comes to non-traditional mitigations, like you're dealing with a CVE where there's not a patch and you need to take a registry key change or some action on those endpoints, you have the flexibility to do that in the platform and also leverage another gallery that we have. We have a vSociety community of hundreds, if not thousands, of users who contribute scripts to that repository that have been reviewed by us, our security analysts, so that everyone else can benefit from the group knowledge that they've gained through dealing with some of these challenges. So you'll see all this in action in just a second here. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan for the demo.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody. So let's jump right in and see what that looks like when we put it to practice. Going to share my screen.
Stop share.
There we are. So wanted to kind of simulate what a new dashboard looks like here. So I did exactly that. I spun up a new dashboard and installed a few assets just so we can kind of see what things look like from a very fresh sort of perspective. And there's a couple specific things that I wanted to also look at that I think are kind of core to the MSP use case. The first of which, pretty obviously, is multi-tenancy. We need to be able to manage multiple clients, either in the same dashboard or have a way to access multiple dashboards. I see some familiar names in there. So, any of the folks who've been working with us for a while know, we do have a couple options to facilitate that, both in a single dashboard sort of fashion as well as a multiple dashboard fashion. For the sake of simplicity and just in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the single dashboard model, as I find that's most traditional to most other MSP tooling out there. So we have this concept. We actually call it teams, but in your RMM, you might hear it referred to as a site or a client. And it's really effectively the same exact thing. So you'll see if I click this button here in the upper left corner, I've already set one up, taking advantage of a little TV magic here. So I can go to this customer, and we can see in the kind of parent tenant, there was 4 assets. And when I switch to this, there's only 1 asset. Again, very small environment. So, taking some liberties there. But what this means is that we now have a partitioned off section of the environment for what would be, a specific customer's tenant within your parent MSP tenant. So we'll go ahead and switch back to the global view, and I'll just briefly touch on how we can set that up very easily. Again, I've already installed some agents in this case. So what we're going to do is go to this settings icon here, this gear, and we'll go to the user management function, and we'll be able to find and manage this under the teams function, teams tab. Here we can see the customer 1, which I've set up already, but let's go and create a new one. So let's just call this customer 2. And what's really nice, especially when we're setting up a new customer, is we have this button, and this is something that we added as a result of feedback that we received from MSPs that we work with in order to make this process a little bit more in line with some of their other tooling and just make this process very, very scalable. So let's click that, and we'll click yes, I'm sure. And what that is going to do is it's basically going to give us a script that has a unique string, in this case, the customer's name, which is added to the end of their deployment script. So we could then use, our RMM or any other tool that we're using in order to push this to the devices that belong to that client. That way we know for a matter of fact that any device that winds up in that tenant or in that site or team belongs to that client because we ran it with this endpoint tag associated with the script. Maybe we already ran the deployment on some of their devices. You maybe didn't know about that feature. We can modify the existing config. You can see here for existing assets, we have this option, which will just basically append that to the existing configurations and add that to their team. So quite straightforward. We can also add additional users. In this case, I'm just going to add myself again. But what I think is useful here is that we can also add any end users, any individuals at the end user site. For example, maybe you have a co-managed contract with this customer, and there's an on-site IT person who you're working hand in hand with. So maybe you want to give them access. So we'll say co-managed at customer.com, something like that. And then we can choose what role we grant them within this tenant. So I would probably say for a co-managed case, we're going to be looking at probably either admin or viewer. The main difference between those being viewer is effectively read-only. They can log in, they can look around, they can pull some reports, but they can't actually perform anything. So again, it depends on your relationship with the customer, their proficiency level, and how you like to engage with that particular customer. The admin level will grant them the ability to start performing things. They can deploy patches, they can run some scripts, they can deploy the patchless protection. So it is a pretty significant jump in the permissions that they have. And as always, you want to adhere to the principle of least privilege. What is the lowest privilege level I can give them in order to meet the goal that they have? So if that's just looking around, seeing that you guys are keeping them secure, viewer is probably right, or maybe even just sending them reports, which we're going to get into. But if they have a little bit more of a stake and hands-on, then admin might be appropriate. In this case, let's just stick with viewer. And I don't know if someone has that email, so I'm going to remove it. But yeah, that's pretty much the process to add a new a new tenant, very, very straightforward. From there, like I said, we can either push that out with our RMM to their devices, or we can append that to some of the existing configs, which conveniently we can actually run through VRX. So that makes things very cohesive, which is nice. So now that we've done the deployment, we've talked a little bit about the multi-tenancy, we see how we can switch between the different clients. What are some of the things that the platform can do for us? You know, multi-tenancy is pretty much expected for an MSP product, right? Well, as Tanya and Landon pointed out, we want to address the vulnerability management lifecycle in a more scalable, effective way. You know, we know with MSPs, you're dealing with a lot of fires to be put out and many other things. So we want to make this process as simple as we possibly can. Again, folks who've been with us for a little while will kind of be familiar with the way that I like to go through some of these demos, but I think of it as the detection of the vulnerabilities, the assessment of the vulnerabilities, and then finally the remediation and reporting. And that's really the whole life cycle. What, again, Landon pointed out is quite nice is that all happens under one roof within VRX. So if we go to the CVE events, and mind you, this is a very new dashboard, so we don't have our nice trend line here just quite yet, as it needs a little bit more time to collect data on the environment. But what we can see is there are some detection events that are occurring, quite a few actually. So we can see Chrome, .NET, Wireshark, Python, all of these different applications not only have been detected that the application is present, but the specific CVE that is, or vulnerability that is affecting the version of the application that the customer is running. As time goes on, as new vulnerabilities are, you know, being released or changes are occurring in the environment, or as we're deploying fixes, as we're going to get to here in the demo momentarily, we'll see that these vulnerabilities are being mitigated, which is our goal. We want to mitigate those vulnerabilities and reduce risk. There's a couple other ways we can look at this. I won't take too much of a deep dive into this today, but we can look at active CVEs, less of a time-based sort of view and more of a backlog or a burn down list, you know, that you can kind of go through and see the vulnerabilities that affect your environment. Maybe you want to look for criticals or vulnerabilities that affect a specific client or even a subgroup of devices within a business unit, perhaps within one of your end customers' tenants. So that can be quite nice to kind of have that level of understanding and visibility as well. Moving on from the detection piece, the next phase in the life cycle is the assessment. And we can see that takes up a pretty good portion of this dashboard here, and that's for good reason. If we look at this, and again, this only has 4 assets in this environment, so we're not expecting this number to be too high, 134 CVEs currently on these 4 devices. And a few of these are actually just kind of vanilla AWS EC2 instances, just kind of fresh out of the box with really nothing going on. So actually 134 is fairly substantial when you consider that's just a base image that you might spin up. But the problem that we're seeing is, and Tanya can certainly attest to this, we've been on quite a few calls where we hear a customer saying, we're doing our scans and we have millions of vulnerabilities. And they really don't know where to get started on that. It's you know, it makes sense, right? It's a huge mountain they have to climb. And to make matters worse, new vulnerabilities are coming out all the time. So they're only falling more and more behind. What we find is that looking at just something like the CVSS score kind of puts them into that position where they don't know where to start. You know, maybe they're looking at hundreds of thousands of high vulnerabilities. Well, why should I focus on fixing one high versus another? They tend to look at things like, you know, potential downtime and things like that. Maybe they're following a security framework if they're in a more regulated industry or something along those lines. But you know, generally when you look at CVSS, it's very hard to differentiate from one high vulnerability to another. So we feel that there's a better way. And that way is a risk-based approach. So we look at how the application that has that vulnerability within the environment is being used. Is it running with high privileges? Is it in a DMZ? Is there actually an exploit in the wild for that vulnerability? Maybe it's just more of a theoretical sort of thing that has to be in a very controlled sort of lab setting that would never actually be a way that a customer would use that vulnerability. or application rather. So these are some of the things that we're checking, and we're also doing that continuously and dynamically. There's no additional setup that's required. It's going to react to changes in your environment just as the vulnerability detection component is as well. Moving on to, I think everyone's kind of favorite phase of the life cycle is the remediation. They want to be done with the vulnerabilities. They want to report to their boss, hey, we fixed that. And they want to be able to report to their end customers, hey, look how we secured you. We patched 1,000 vulnerabilities, and we went from 1,000,000 to hopefully a much smaller number than that, right? So that's really the goal here. Right now, we're looking at our application view. And this is a really great part to kind of understand that risk a little bit better, especially in an MSP setting where you have a very wide customer base. They're all using different tools. They're in different sectors. They have different considerations with the way that they're patching. And again, the multi-tenancy helps with that because we can have a more kind of focused view on just what belongs to a specific customer. Maybe your MSP has technicians who are assigned to specific customers so they can kind of operate in that rather than in a more global view as we're seeing right now. But this is a great way to kind of help us understand, put everything together, help us understand how we can take that detection and assessment information and transact it into executing and remediating and reducing risk. I'm going to take a look at VMware tools here. And I see that there's no patch available for this. So it's a high-risk application in this environment. We could take a look at the VRX analysis, and we could see why it's a high risk. So there's known vulnerabilities. There is an exploit for it. It's a high attack surface. It makes sense if it's installed on a bunch of VMs, right, in an ESXi environment. We can see, there's a whole bunch of X tags associated with it that are increasing the risk score. We could take a look at the versions, and we can see we're running 10.1. It happens to be on one asset, and there's 9 CVEs associated with it. So we could drill down and understand what asset it is and what those CVEs are. In fact, let's take a look at the CVEs. We could see some of those here. Maybe we want to read about some of these. Actually, this one is quite old, 1,000 days ago, 750 days ago. It looks like most of these are quite old. So what we would want to do is, again, there's no patch in this case because we're running such an old version that probably needs to be removed and upgraded, or maybe a script can help us to get that to the latest branch, for example. But maybe we need this specific version for whatever reason. Or maybe the remediation is going to take us a while because we're using this in a very specific way that is going to cause some downtime if we make any changes to it. It's something we hear time and time again. Manufacturing, Tanya shared that in the slides earlier, along with healthcare. They're using these old systems to run their production floor. They, of course, the security team wants to move off of it, but operationally they can't. So we need to balance security and operations. It's not one in replacement of the other. They need to kind of find that symbiotic point. So we have this thing called patchless protection, and the exact use case is pretty much what I described. There's something that's being used which doesn't have a readily available fix from the vendor for one reason or the other, and we're not willing to accept or tolerate the risk at the current level because, again, we're using it. It has a business value. We can't just remove it. What do we do? So the patchless protection gives us that compensating control, which allows us to, again, reduce the risk but still get the functionality of that application. So let's go ahead and apply it in this case. Actually, funny enough, it happens to be on my machine that I'm doing the demo from here. So I got to go remove that after or upgrade it, like I said. But let's look at the monitor mode and the protect mode first in this case. And let's put the protect mode on. So I'll hit continue there. And what's really cool about the patchless protection is, again, it's going to keep letting you use that application, but it's going to observe the system calls that are being sent to it. And if any of those are deemed to be malicious, then we would receive an alert. And also in the protect mode, it's going to deny that system call from reaching and exploiting the application. So we can see this is running. And let's double check if this will reduce the risk in this case. Let's go back to the risk overview. Hasn't just quite executed it yet, but what we should expect to see is that there's going to be a risk reduction here. It may not be enough. It is a compensating control at the end of the day. It's not a silver bullet. We're not actually removing the vulnerability. It's more of a mitigation. But in those cases where you have no other option, this is a great thing to have in your back pocket. Moving on to some of the more kind of traditional methods of remediation, and I think Landon summarized this really well. We have an automation component which allows us to build these cadences, build these workflows that are going to deploy patches, deploy scripts on a frequency of your choosing. Tanya also pointed out, the workforce shortage that we're seeing in the industry and how we're expecting these numbers to climb in terms of number of risks, vulnerabilities, AI-based exploitations. So the way that we're going to be able to combat that is through automation. So I'm going to build out a really simple automation here. I've got a handful of applications that I'm going to select, which were detected in this environment. Let's see, we've got 10 here. That's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and select next. I'll then choose the severity that I want to target with this automation. I'll choose if I want to trigger a reboot. What's really nice about our reboot settings here is that it's dynamic. I mentioned earlier, we don't want security at the cost of taking down the business. They need to be, kind of existing in harmony. The auto reboot will check to see if the patches that we deployed actually need a reboot, and it'll only begin that reboot process if one of these 10 applications that we've chosen actually needs that reboot to happen. Otherwise, it's going to be fully silent and the user can continue about their day, or the server can continue about whatever service it's providing. We can also configure that, in more granular cases. Maybe you want to give the user a few hours to postpone. That's very common, of course. So there's many different ways that we can, again, find that balance between security and operations. We can also use the automations to build out multi-stage policies that have not only application patches, which is a very large attack surface, but also operating system updates. I'm sure everyone here is used to scheduling patches following Patch Tuesday. So of course, that's a very common thing that we see here. We also, of course, support Linux and Mac as well, and we can do patching there, but Patch Tuesday is something we hear time and time again. So let's grab the Windows 11 in this case, and we're really just going to rinse and repeat what we did in the previous step with the application patching. I'm going to choose all of the severities in this case. We can also choose the specific patch. You may want to take that approach if you have a more rigorous change management process that requires you, dictating the exact package that's going to be deployed. Whereas this method is, of course, a little bit more scalable. What we find is automate what you can, and that should give you enough time back to handle those more ad hoc cases much more rapidly. The last mitigation that we have in the platform is our scripting engine. And this is a really flexible part of the tool. It allows us to cover a huge variety of use cases. Again, I'm sure since a lot of folks here are joining from MSPs, you're probably running scripts in your RMM today or some of your other automation tools that you have in your stack. So you'll be no stranger to that. Our take on that is, how can we use scripts to protect us against vulnerabilities? And the vulnerabilities that come to mind for that part of the scope that you wouldn't handle with a patch or something like the patchless protection is configuration-based vulnerabilities. I'm sure everyone has seen cases where Microsoft or some other vendor says, hey, you have to go and modify this configuration. It could be a registry edit, or, in Print Nightmare, you had to stop the print spooler service for a little while. Upgrade SMB, TLS, something with cert signing, perhaps. There's endless cases with this. We have, as Landon pointed out again, not only a team of threat researchers, but also a community that contributes these scripts so that we can provide our customers and our partners a starting point, and sometimes more than a starting point. I say starting point because you may want to modify these scripts a little bit to work a bit better for a specific customer. Maybe they've got, again, a really interesting implementation of a piece of software. In some cases, you can just run them out of the box. That really is something that you would have to understand the customer's environment, and that's why we love partnering with MSPs. But yeah, you'll see there's quite a few scripts here that allow us to not only find those detection-based vulnerabilities, but also remediate them. So we can confirm, are you running that configuration that the vendor has deemed as exploitable? And that serves as an additional detection point beyond just detecting that version of software which can be affected is present. And then beyond that, should we find any cases that match that, we can run a follow-on remediation script, which is actually going to correct that vulnerability. As you can see today, we've got 685 scripts in our catalog, and this is growing all the time. There's some operational scripts here as well. So again, we can use this for things that aren't directly related to vulnerability management, which does give some additional value. I'm going to go ahead and remove that from the automation here, and just going to talk about a couple additional actions for this automation before we start to wrap things up. Reports are something that we hear time and time again from our MSP partners, and again, rightfully so. You need to be able to show your end customer the value that you're providing with these services, to tell them that story and show them how you're helping keep them secure. We do have a native report hub, which is what we're looking at right now. And in fact, we can add any of these reports to our automation. So maybe we want to run some patches, I don't know, over the weekend because it's outside peak business hours. And we want to get a report sent to our email to let us know, hey, all of these patches succeeded, or maybe there's 1 or 2 failures. We can see why those failed. So those are a couple things that we see quite often. We can also use some of our executive reports, which are more kind of focused on the trend over time rather than more granular technical data that an engineer, technician, a practitioner would expect to see and work with. This is more intended for the C-suite, the senior managers, that type of audience. This can demonstrate the number of the risk that was reduced, the number of vulnerabilities that were mitigated, maybe identify some key vulnerabilities to focus on during the next patching cycle, things of that nature. And it's really handy because, again, we can build this into our automation so that we can make this a repeated practice rather than doing it case by case. And the last thing I wanted to cover in terms of the automation actions is the CIS benchmark. So this is a new feature that we're really excited about because it's not necessarily tied to a CVE per se, but this is getting into kind of a greater compliance suite and something that we want to envelop within the tool. If anyone isn't familiar with CIS benchmarks, they're a set of standards or controls or configurations, more appropriately, that you should be running on your machine in order to harden it, to make it less likely to be attacked. So again, it's not necessarily tied to a specific CVE, more so a classification of CVE, like a family almost. Yeah, Ricky, I see is happy to see that. Yeah, agreed. Thanks for that. So yeah, we're really looking to build this out quite a bit more. Currently, you can see here, there's a couple different ways that we can audit against CIS benchmarks. In this environment, we're just seeing Windows. We do have some additional capabilities for Mac and for Linux as well. But again, it's a very small environment with just the Windows devices. So let's go ahead and just add this one, and we can run an audit against those. What we're going to be adding pretty soon, and kind of keeping in the DNA of the platform of not just finding the issue, but fixing it, being very actionable, is we're going to, again, not only identify that we have machines that are not meeting our CIS benchmarks, but we can apply a policy which is getting them within compliance. So that's, again, something we're really, really excited about. So lastly, we've got the target selection. In this case, I'm just going to select all assets. All assets is the default group that you get with any VRX dashboard. In this case, I do have this customer one group, which is essentially their parent level group for that subtenant I talked about earlier. Typically, if you're doing subgroups, servers, workstations, different business units, that would happen within the customer site or team. But for right now, I'm just going to run that at the all asset level because we only have a couple assets in here, so I don't want to limit that any further. And because I want to get some immediate feedback, I'm going to run this now. But what I find to be the most valuable in the automations, as the name implies, is setting this up on a recurring cadence. We all know that there's, again, Patch Tuesday every month. There's a new Chrome update, feels like every day. All of these applications, and again, with the MSP use case in mind, you have to apply that to all of your customers, so it's exponential. So yeah, again, we'll run this now, but just keep in mind that I would certainly take heavy advantage of the recurring options that we have. Let's go ahead and hit finish. We could do a final review. Since we walked through that together, I know I'm happy with all the settings. I'm going to hit activate and finally continue. And now we have an automation policy, which is going to be doing some of our patching for us. And it's also going to be running that CIS benchmark, so we can see how our configs are changing over time and the alignment with the benchmark to see if we're getting any drift against that. So it looks like that's just finishing up here. We'll give that just a moment. We see that it was created. Perfect. So yeah, here we have our automation. And again, this one is just going to be running once. If we had this on a recurring basis, we'd see some upcoming activities and things like that. But here we're looking for that pretty immediate feedback. We can also go to the activity log and we can track that. We don't see that anything has shown up just quite yet, but we will expect to see that momentarily, apart from the patchless protection that I enabled earlier. So we'll give that a couple moments, and while we're waiting for that, I do quickly want to talk about two things, again, before we start to wrap things up here. Our integrations. With MSPs, there's quite a few tools. There's, we try to consolidate as much as we possibly can for that cost optimization, for that efficiency, as we talked about earlier. That's something, our partners have expressed that they're huge fans of, and, obviously we are too. But there's always going to be other tools for other areas of your IT ops, your security ops. So making sure that we can work within that stack, again, in a very cohesive way, is extremely important. So we've got our integration hub, and there's a number of, kind of the usual suspects that you'll see here. I do want to highlight one in particular that I hear quite a lot with MSPs, which is going to be sending tickets to their PSA. Maybe they're using Autotask or a comparable solution for generation of tickets. That's how a lot of MSPs function, right? We can use webhooks for that. That's a pretty good use case and gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of the types of data we can send to the ticketing system. But something we added somewhat recently that you might not be aware of if you are someone who's been with us for a bit is this notification hub. And what we can do with that is we can set up an alert that says, for example, I'm calling this one new CVE, and I'm going to say a CVE was detected. And it'd be great to set that up for the customer. So let's do that, because now anytime there's a new CVE for that customer, we'll get a ticket. Usually there's some sort of filtering that happens within the PSA that will assign it to that specific customer, and maybe even a technician that's assigned to them. So as much as we can align with that, the better, right? We can also check here. Maybe we want to do a CVSS filter and just look for highs or criticals or something like that. And then finally, we'll say, do this action. So in this case, and you can see we have a few others coming soon to this, which again, we're quite excited about. But we can send an email. And typically what we find is most MSP ticketing systems will have a distribution group support at msp.com, and anytime that address or that distribution group receives an email, it will generate a ticket. So that's pretty much exactly what we're going to do. We're going to say ticket at msp.com, and we are going to say, oh, it would help if I click it. Let's just send it to myself, actually. And we can say, something like customer 1 has a new high or critical CVE. And that's a great way to get your team to, say, hey, we need to go check this out, and, kind of triage that new vulnerability. Hopefully you have an automation in place that's going to take care of that, but regardless, it gives you kind of that leg up to get a head start of it. It's documented in your PSA. That's also going to help you with, again, the reporting, telling that story of showing them the value of your services, how many tickets have been closed, and that sort of thing. You could fill in, whatever message here. We'll just leave that blank. Some additional settings as well if we want to do bulk emails coming soon, but we can save that once we are happy with it. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the demo today. We can see that quite a few of these jobs are in the running category now. Don't know if we have any that have succeeded just quite yet. Yeah, it looks like they're started, so I don't know that I'll get to showcase that. We see that the CIS benchmarks, but really, really quick feedback in the platform, which is also quite nice to get that immediate result. And I think with that, we got about 5 or so minutes left here. I will pass it back to Tanya to kind of close us out. You might be on mute. Can't hear you.
I was going to say, I'll see if I can get the presentation back up.
Sure. If not, I can too.
Can you see it?
Yep, we can now.
Oh, you do? Okay. So demo?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, do we want to open up for any questions?
Yeah. If there are any questions, feel free to show them in the chat. We've got that cool highlight feature I tried to showcase earlier. So yeah, would love to hear those.
Questions or feedback, all welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just go through the next couple things. So quick next steps. At the end of this, we'll be following up with an email, and we'll be sending out a certificate for having attended today's session. Our ask is to please share that certificate in your network so you can take it, you can post it on LinkedIn. We will also add to it the latest Gartner report, as I've mentioned, that also mentions Vicarius in that and what we're doing around remediation and automation. So that's, again, hot off the press, and we'll have that coming to you. And then the last I will say, and this is a new program that we just launched, the Vicarius Advocacy Program. So many of you are learning about us and knowing about us for the first time. And then many of you also work with us and have for some time. So if you are an existing partner that works with Vicarius today, then please click on this QR code and you can sign up for the advocacy program. What you're doing at this point is just raising your hand and saying, yep, I'm interested in it. And then you continue to get communication on that front from us as well, so on that piece. I also want to point out that within the partner portal, we're constantly adding new collateral, new information to it, and I encourage you to visit it often. It is a place that you go to register deals and things like that, but it is also a great repository for anything that you want to use for your business, but also for some training. And so this is the newest add to the partner portal, which is continued education. We do offer these sessions live, but we also have them recorded. A number of them are recorded, and you can see they have different topics. So sales focus, support focus, architecture, they are in various languages. And so feel free to join the one that is most relevant to you. And then at the end of these on-demand sessions, you also can get certified, and we can issue certificates here as well. So that's on the partner portal, and in the email follow-up, we will also send a link to the partner portal. And with that, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, I see we do have a question. So yeah, agreed. Thank you, everybody. Let's quickly address this one here. So yeah, Ricky, thank you again. VRX 2.0 agent, what is the ETA? So yeah, for those that don't know, we are working on a pretty large new feature set, and we kind of see it as big enough to call it 2.0, right? I do just want to point out, so it's not specifically a new agent. More specifically, what it is going to be a kind of a new view in the dashboard, and that's going to help us to support all of the new features that we plan on adding as a part of V2. Again, think more like front end, basically, in the GUI there. With that being said, it is going to be a bit of a phased approach. So the first part of that is going to be largely focused on agentless. So things that the agent can't run on. Effectively, think network scanning. There's a lot of additional features than just kind of basic network scanning, but just to give you kind of a frame of reference there. Beyond that, there's going to be some more components being added where we can correlate that data back to the agent, something we're calling findings and evidence, software bill of materials. So yeah, a lot of really cool stuff on the horizon. In terms of your question about the ETA, it's definitely one of the biggest things we're pushing right now. So that's where I would say most of the development effort is focused. I think that initial release, again, don't hold me to it exactly, but I think we're looking around like the September timeline, give or take. So yeah, we'll definitely reach out with any updates there, and yeah, something we're all anticipating quite a bit. So thank you. Cool. I don't see any other questions. So yeah, once again, it's been great to be able to share some time with everybody, talk about the MSP use case within the product, and yeah, we hope to speak again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.